primary issue I see in Slovenia is not that young people are disengaged from politics, is that, or, the society, is that young people are not being listened to, or that our issues, that our concerns are not being adequately addressed by the system.
So do you think that maybe when we talk about engaging young people in politics and local community, is corruption something that triggers young people and they don't want to speak about that and they don't want to engage in corruption and politics because of politicians themselves?
Yes, Benjamin, I'll let you have the word on this one.
Thank you. Well, I mean, certainly there are these unambiguous topics, but at the same time, ambiguous topics that can be a certain form of apprehension for young people and a factor against being or starting to be involved in local, regional, or national politics on any level. I mean, one of such systemic issues that you mentioned is corruption. But I mean, I'll take the discussion to a little bit of a broader context, and I'll be curious for the Slovenian perspective is besides corruption, which is a very systemic issue, it's also this post-Soviet mentality that we have, especially here in Hungary. I mean, sure, we're in the EU and we're solving it, but a lot of these residual sentiments of a traditional power structure can be perceived by young people as something that might dissuade them from engaging more actively or looking forward to develop in this area of playing in or contributing or to just general activism.
I think in the case of Slovenia, our historical experience with socialism was in many ways different from that of Hungary, of Poland, of other post-Soviet countries, in that, or former Eastern Bloc countries, in that in Slovenia, the socialist system we had was one that was markedly more pluralistic and more open to dissent and organizing outside of the government or outside of the formal political institutions. And this has, of course, contributed to how young people today perceive politics and where they choose to engage with their communities, with the society, with the political arena. I remember that over in a national study of young people and their relationship to society, Youth 2020, over 70% of young people expressed some or major distrust towards politicians. So, of course, Stella, what you mentioned, corruption, we've had quite a few very major, very lasting corruption scandals in Slovenia that have degraded young people's trust in politicians themselves, sort of pushes people away from engaging with politics formally. That is to say, joining a political party, that is to say, going to vote, that is to say, campaigning for this or other issue within the formal political system. But this heritage of civil society organizations outside of the state-sanctioned sphere means that young people in Slovenia are vastly more open towards organizing within various civil society organizations, towards organizing within informal protest movements. For example, I can confidently say that if there is one institution or organization that young people in Slovenia have, confidence or faith in, it is the Slovenian chapter of Fridays for Future.
I suppose the major difference from this, as we said, is the historical upbringing of the modern statehood of both of these countries. So naturally that leads to diverging courses and whatnot. Although I would like to emphasize that amateur political activism is something that is also very prevalent in all spheres of whether it's government policy, correlating to anything. But I suppose the intrinsically learned and embedded freedoms that one might be accustomed to is the area where I suppose it might differ significantly between Hungary and Slovenia.
Yeah. I sorry, Stella, if I may just have one small reply to this. Yeah, I think that young people's relationship to democracy, towards civil liberties, is definitely a question that where Slovenia differs broadly from most Central European states, and also where it stands out in the space of former Yugoslavia. Because this study that questioned young people's political attitudes across former Yugoslavia showed that out of all the countries, Slovenia was the one where young people most unquestionably believed in democracy and their capability to, organize and change the course of politics, and in broad civil liberties and human rights like freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and so on.
Yes, I believe in that. Well, when you mentioned social regimes and our new course on democratic society, what do you think about role of European Union in that context? I mean, we have a democratic society, we have a European Union, some kind of European civil rights movement, and how does that have some kind of implications on your country and politics of your countries? Benjamin.
All right. So, I mean, the EU is a very, very new. Well, traditionally, what the EU has achieved until now has only been achieved through war across the European continent. So, the fact that it was able to rise, well, out of war, but in a peaceful nature, has allowed for the EU's priorities to really challenge this traditional power hierarchy, and allowed for and facilitated as a vehicle for youth to be significantly more engaged, and it addresses the problem that also my colleague here mentioned, that when there's distrust in the government, the national government, regional, or just any level of government in that state, a lot of people within the European Union, specifically youth, might look towards the EU with activist ambitions. So the EU really can act as a second alternative for influence on a politician, state, or regarding a certain legislation or whatever it may be, but any political or policy action. It can serve as an alternative route. If anything, it can also serve as a reassurance for alternatives, like a perceived checks and balances.
I broadly agree with Mr. Bardos on this issue. The European Union is very positively viewed across all sectors of Slovenian society, and it is quite telling that there is not a single major political party, faction, or movement that is advocating Slovenia's disengagement or, exiting the European Union. When it comes to the specific role that the European Union plays in youth policy and how young people relate to the EU, I find that most people are quite supportive of Slovenia's European integration. They do, to a degree, perceive themselves as European, and they're very open to using the opportunities that the European Union offers us, such as, for example, Erasmus exchanges, Erasmus Plus programs for civil society organizations, and so on. However, I do find that specific structured dialogue programs and directives and initiatives organized by the European Union to try to engage with young people do not quite penetrate very deep into the society. The only people that really seem to engage with these projects are people who are already themselves politically involved, might be involved in youth wings of political parties or the Slovenian National Youth Council, and as such already to a degree represent the political elite within our generation.
Yes, I can agree with both of you. Well, I think that in Croatia, European Union has really big influence on politics, especially among young people and among youth council. So, Srđan, you are president of youth council in Ljubljana. So maybe you can say how youth council actually involves young people.
I would like to here distinguish between
maybe
two
on just local
concepts in Slovenia
level
that both translate to youth council. There is the Municipal Youth Council, which is an advisory body to the mayor, and there is the Civil Society Youth Council, which is an umbrella organization of various youth organizations within some locality. Now, how the municipal youth councils engage with young people, what they do is they essentially have a few meetings with the mayor every year. The young people come and they say, this and this and this are our problems, this is what matters to us, and the mayor says, okay, and then it is up to the mayor or the city council whether or not they actually address these issues, because municipal youth councils in and of themselves do not have any powers beyond the advisory. With regards to civil society youth councils, so the umbrella organizations on the local level, what we do is essentially engage in some slightly more structured dialogue with the local authorities. For example, the Ljubljana Youth Council, which I lead, was heavily invested in constructing the city of Ljubljana's strategy for young people for the past 10 years. We also organize projects aimed at improving the work and coordination of youth organizations in the city, whether that is organizing trainings on public relations management, or it's something very basic like organizing a picnic where all the people from various political youth wings, scouting organizations, non-NGOs can come together, network, and exchange ideas. But the main role that youth councils, both of the municipal and non-government variety, serve is that we essentially provide a direct voice or direct advisory to the authorities when it comes to, youth issues. They can come to us and ask us, hey, what's been bothering you?
Okay, thank you. And Benjamin, do you have some kind of youth council, and is it different from what Srđan just said?
As in military policy as well, would be the YATA structure that I mentioned. Now that I've heard the description of it, it functions eerily similarly, and I wouldn't be surprised as the NATO Public Diplomacy Department does have cooperation with the EU. So functionally, the YATA network operates on a very similar basis, except the advisory role is not played to like a mayor or a general in this case, but is referred directly to the public diplomacy department of NATO. But what concerns, I would suppose, the civilian aspect, that as that is traditionally, a more traditional approach. In Hungary, the youth engagement in European Union politics, while it does exist, anything comparable to what is happening in Slovenia isn't too, well, I wouldn't say realistic, but rather isn't too prevalent. Yes, as I yet again just come back to the way this power structure is received. I mean, that's why think tanks like in the country function very differently than traditionally as an advisor, like an outsider advisor to national policy isn't really something that is too developed or too matured as an idea. Instead, it operates much more through solely EU channels. So like what does exist in Hungary is that there are youth committees with reporting on student welfare, how Erasmus is going, but these are very preliminary, well, not preliminary as they've been going on for a while, but they haven't really matured to the stage that one might have hoped and expected them to be at.
Okay, thank you. And well, in Croatia, what Srđan said, we have. I am vice president of Municipality Youth Council, and we are advisory body for our local government. And I can say that we have a really nice dialogue going on. And we are just in the process of building youth center in Brdovec. And our municipality, or exactly local government, did that thankfully to European Union funds. And I was wondering how important are actually European Union finances in order to do something for young people. Can our countries do solely something for young people?
Well, I mean,
not
as I said
just
previously,
through
he
European
plays
Union
a
funds.
really important role. But what I mean to say with that is, I think that outside of the environment that is fostered by the EU, traditionally, I wouldn't say that I could see such organizations developing to a scale where it credibly and actively advises to change national policy. However, I must clarify something. That is that there are cases in which these develop. However, these organizations more often than not take up more of political party positions rather than a vehicle to voice student positions or youth positions, and therefore help the actual aims of what those younger generations are trying to achieve. And I've gotten caught up in a lot of long words, so I'll clarify again. It is completely possible for such organizations to develop nationally. However, my fear would be is that these organizations, eerie of something in the early 20th century, in the 30s, would develop into a more politically motivated association.
Right. So on the issue of utilizing EU funds for young youth-focused projects, I'd say that this depends on many factors. For example, if it is a municipal project, this largely depends on how big the municipality is and how big its tax revenues are. For a smaller municipality like the one you come from, I believe that it would be quite necessary to obviously, reach into European cohesion funds or other sources of funding to make up for the lack of tax revenue. Somewhere in Ljubljana, on the other hand, which is the center of economic growth in Slovenia, is quite capable of financing these projects itself. For example, the flagship project in the youth sector for the past couple of years has been the construction of a gigantic multi-story youth center in the center of Ljubljana, which has been entirely financed by the city of Ljubljana, but unfortunately is suffering from, which has been financed entirely by the city of Ljubljana, but is going through delays because of partly also a lack of political will. Now, when it comes to bottom-up projects, those organized by youth organizations themselves, which typically in Slovenia, and I assume the same goes for Croatia, do not have stable sources of financing. Here, sources of funding like Erasmus Plus, like various EU and non-government grants are crucial for actually getting these projects off the ground. And one of the major goals of governments acting to help the youth sector should be educating the staff of youth organizations on how to correctly and effectively apply for these grants and funding.
Thank you, Srđan. Thank you very much. And I'm really happy to see that Mr. Branimir is here. Mr. Branimir is responsible for project preparation and implementation, as well as strategic planning in the municipality of Brdovec. So, can you say something about European EU funds and our project about Youth Center?
Yes, hello. I would like to greet everyone in the panel. First of all, I would like to apologize. I'm outside, so maybe the microphone will pick up some external sounds. But I hope you can hear me.
No problem, we can hear you.
Okay. First, just a brief introduction. Stela already said all the important stuff, but my role in the municipality is preparing, implementing, and focusing on evaluation of projects financed by the European Union, as well as projects financed by the national funds. We are one of the largest municipalities. We have a two-tier municipality system in Croatia. The towns are larger municipalities, and the smaller municipalities, we are one of the largest smaller municipalities. We just call them municipalities. And given that information, we have a certain budget, which is, we can say, the mayor likes to say, enough for many things, but it's always lacking for some specific areas. And especially youth has been an area that has suffered a lot in the past time. But lately we have finally arrived to some conclusions that youth needs to be addressed. Youth problems need to be addressed, and we have to enable our youth organizations. We have to give them enough space, give them enough time, and make sure that they have what they need for their development. our project, which has started in I believe last year. Last year we have decided to build a youth center. It's of course a lesser variant of this one in Ljubljana. It's not a multi-story building, although it has 2 stories, so it would classify as a multi-story. But no, it's a smaller building, but a building that has been in the municipality's ownership for a very long time. It's a leisure center of sorts, a public building that has lost its usefulness. It's not being used in a lot. Approximately only used once weekly, or even less than that. So we've decided to use this building as a youth center, because our youth definitely needs a space. Our youth organizations need a space from which they would lead their everything about their projects, and it's basically only the beginning. After the construction of the center, we are going to have events organized in the building, but that is something that I believe Stela already has in mind. Stela, should I go into details about the project?
Well, you can share some details, but I don't think we have too long for that.
Okay, then just briefly, it's around 500,000 euros, and we're going to remodel this building. The stories are going to have the area in the first floor is going to have a space for studying, for education, basically all the peaceful activities that our members of our youth need. The ground floor is going to be somewhat louder. It's going to be a relaxing part of the building, and the lower floor, the basement, is going to have a gym, so they can relax and do some sports activities if they need to. I won't go into many details other than that.
Thank you very much. And I wanted to ask about ways that local government has to recognize youth problems. Can you say a few sentences about that?
I'm sorry, the local government has?
Ways to recognize youth problems.
Well, as you've mentioned before, we have just formed a youth council, local municipality youth council. We've had one before. It was one of the. This is a new term, but basically, local government is learning from the field. It doesn't have many, especially in a municipality that is smaller. It doesn't have many employees that are specifically tied to youth problems. So what we are doing all the time, and I assume that many municipalities have that, especially the smaller ones, the employees have various parts of their job, various areas that they take care of. So some of us do take care of youth problems, such as scholarships, funding the train tickets, bus tickets, etc. But for recognizing youth problems, I believe the key is cooperation and communication with the members of the youth. We've all had, almost everyone that works in our municipality is a local, and we know what the problems are. We know what's lacking. We know what's in surplus. So we get stopped on the street and asked about those things. Why don't we have a center? Why don't we have a space that we can use for our activities? We got that from the retirement, from the retired population, and they actually pulled through, and we have already organized a space for them, a sort of a club for them. And right now it's the turn for the youth organizations.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm really hoping that we can have great collaboration as we did in the past. So I would just ask the same question, Benjamin and Srđan, if he's still here. I know he also has technical issues. So Benjamin, in a few sentences, do you think that youth problems are recognized as they are, or there is some lack of recognition of real problems?
I would actually say that in terms of recognition, there isn't too much of a problem. Likewise to what the other panelists said, the problems are very well known even on a national level. Even awareness isn't an issue towards that. It's rather communication where these efforts fall short. There are many splintered, I wouldn't say factions, but associations, movements spread across Hungary. But to have one cohesive voice, rather, is where these efforts fall short. So the problems are very well known. There are solutions for them, but to mobilize these concerns into one cohesive voice in order to get political will behind it is where the majority of where the majority of most efforts to absolve the concerns of the youth fall short, at least speaking domestically from Hungary.
Thank you very much. Srđan?
The same thing about Slovenia. Most political parties, politicians are very well aware. Most media is very eager to talk about the problems of young people. Everyone knows what the problems of young people are. Housing, education, lack of access to quality jobs, precarization of labor. But these issues within the context of the Slovenian political arena never seem to get addressed. Why? Because there is no one who is willing and who has the organizational capabilities to actually exert enough pressure upon politicians, upon the state, upon the national and local governments to actually bring these changes into fruition, to make them a number one priority. And things will stay like that if nothing changes. The problems of young people will only become relevant problems once young people themselves become a problem for politicians. Now, on the local level, this might mean, going to the mayor and knocking on his door every day until he or she resolves the issue that young people find important. On a national level, this means mobilizing a sufficiently large portion of the youth electorate to actually give support to those political factions which seem to actually care about the issues of young people, which will in turn cause all other parties to consider the young people's voice, their interests in crafting policy. Now, there are some organizations in Slovenia which already claim to do that, but they have, over the years, turned into pretty functions for people to put on LinkedIn's and only seem to serve their own purposes and not actually engage with wider society. So going back to the local level, going back to the grassroots level and organizing from the bottom up is how young people will be able to have their voice heard in local, in regional, and in national politics.
Thank you very much. And for the end, I just want to thank you all for coming, and it was really lovely to hear your opinions. It is really nice to have you here, and I hope we can do that someday again. So I would just say that we have to be loud, we have to be clear about our needs, and we can be the change makers. Thank you very much.